ini tidak dikupas secara detail di koran ataupun di media atau gimana-gimana. Tapi menurut Anda, Anda silakan kalau mau kasih input Anda lewat chat. Saya bisa baca. Menurut Anda salahnya di mana nih? Apa sih yang telah mengakibatkan Bank Mandiri sehingga kasus kemarin, kalau nggak salah saya ya, maaf kalau saya salah, kemarin kasusnya saldo ataupun the money that was inside the account was actually rolled back to a older date. Jadi orang yang awalnya punya duit tiba-tiba nol, orang yang tiba-tiba nggak punya duit tiba-tiba punya banyak duit. Nah ini kan suatu hal yang tidak boleh berlaku dalam bank. Dan jujur, karena secara faktor strategic risk, sebuah bank itu harus mengelak untuk what's the right word I should use, to ensure that system integrity is the number one key issue that they must solve. Bank nggak boleh mempunyai integrity problem. Nah, ini udah jelas banget adalah masalah ataupun problem di faktor integritas sistem perbankan. Nah, otomatis sekarang pertanyaannya gini, apakah kedepannya si customer Bank Mandiri bisa yakin? Ya, ada sih yang masih mau tetap aja ke Bank Mandiri. Tetapi kalau hal yang sama berlaku di negara-negara seperti contoh di Malaysia, selesai itu bank. Besok pagi udah bungkus. Atau seandainya berlaku di Singapura, bukannya bungkus lagi, malah kena denda, atau mungkin juga bisa kena lawsuit di pengadilan. Dan beda negara aturannya lebih ketat dan lebih sadis. Dan jujur nggak tahu apa susulan daripada kasus Mandiri, tapi ini adalah suatu faktor yang kita harus pikirkan berhubungan dengan what went wrong with the governance. Is it IT governance or is it security governance? Menurut saya, daripada pemerhatian saya, di sini ada dua hal yang telah terjadi. Pertama, despite the fact that they have all the policy procedures, they must have a good risk assessment strategy, they must have a good risk measuring or risk detection method. But what went wrong? Simple. You have all this, but you lack supervision. What you say is not what you do. What you do is not what you say. And that is the problem. This is a very clear example. So basically, what I'm trying to tell you is information security is a institution-wide issue. Tolong teman-teman paham ya. Apabila saya bilang information security, ini bukanlah problem IT. Tidak. Information security is a business problem. Okay, it's a business problem. It's not an IT problem. Seandainya perusahaan Anda masih mempunyai pola pemikiran di mana Anda memikirkan cyber security ini adalah problem di IT, tingkat maturity perusahaan Anda berada di dalam level 0 atau 1, ya. Nah, seandainya kalau Anda dalam bisnis Anda atau di perusahaan Anda mempunyai pola pemikiran di mana Anda membilang ataupun Anda telah mendefine cyber security di perusahaan Anda sebagai suatu strategic problem atau business problem, nah berarti perusahaan Anda sudah berada dalam maturity level yang tinggi. Berarti Anda mempunyai tingkat kemampuan untuk melihat risiko dan juga strategi dari sudut pandang yang berbeda, yang lebih bagus malah saya bilang. Yang kedua adalah di sini, di Bank Mandiri, yang saya perhatikan adalah accountability-nya masih kurang. Nah, kenapa accountability? I did not see, ataupun saya telah sempat cari-cari di seluruh internet susulan kasus Bank Mandiri, tapi saya belum ketemu resolution methodnya seperti apa. Dan juga saya belum sempat, mungkin ini berita internal mereka atau gimana, tapi saya belum sempat melihat siapa sih orang yang accountable dan apa sih yang telah dilakukan untuk memperbaiki kondisi ini. Itu saya belum sempat lihat, dan saya sempat juga tanya sama teman-teman yang masih kerja di Bank Mandiri. Mereka bilang, maaf Pak Desmon, ini data internal saya nggak bisa share, jadi saya nggak tahu. Jadi berarti kasus-kasus seperti ini, kalau seandainya berlaku, yang akan menjadi accountable adalah leadernya sendiri. Berarti siapa? Ya, board of director, directornya sendiri, ya, CIO, CTO, CEO, semuanya akan menjadi accountable ke atas suatu hal yang berlaku sekarang yang telah mendampakkan bisnis. Dan jujur, yang saya perhatikan, maaf mungkin ini pemerhatian saya, kadang-kadang kenapa hal-hal ini bisa berlaku adalah secara strategik, mungkin Anda telah membuat how to do it secara, from a broad level. Tetapi kenapa hal-hal ini bisa berlaku adalah, pertama, in any cybersecurity instances, one of the most dangerous or the most scary thing is the staff, karyawan. Karyawan yang tidak diinformasikan, tidak dikasih pelatihan, yang tidak dikasih awareness, itu sendiri akan menjadi ancaman. Nah, ini adalah contoh yang klasik yang telah berlaku di Indonesia. Maaf, mungkin di Malaysia juga pernah berlaku. Saya bukan bilang Malaysia itu terlalu bagus, tidak. Mungkin teman-teman pernah tahu Bank CIMB, mungkin pernah dengar. Nah, di situ juga ada kasus yang sama yang pernah berlaku, di mana pada tahun 2018 pernah ada kasus di mana daripada online bankingnya Bank CIMB Malaysia, seseorang itu dengan melakukan pengubahan kode atau gimana, bisa melompat daripada satu account ke account yang lain tanpa menggunakan username dan password. Nah, itu lebih parah daripada kasus Bank Mandiri. Nah, tetap ini adalah suatu hal yang menjadi keraguan untuk banyak bisnis. Walaupun ini adalah contoh banking, saya pikir mungkin daripada industri asuransi ataupun industri teman-teman yang ada di seminar kita hari ini mungkin bisa nge-relate kepada kasusnya. Oke, saya lanjut. Nah, ini yang terbaru. Indonesia sees mysterious cyber attack in 2020. Nah, ini pada tahun 2020 ada indikator. Banyak sektor pemerintah Indonesia sudah mulai diserang dari awalnya COVID. Nah, ini saya nggak tahu Kominfo udah ngeh atau enggak, tapi sejujurnya pada tahun 2020 dari bulan September sendiri sudah ada indikator bahwa banyak kantor pemerintah yang sedang dijebol oleh hacker-hacker dari negara Indonesia sendiri, bukan dari luar ya, bukan dari luar, tapi dari Indonesia sendiri. Tapi kalau kita pikir, nah data apa yang mau diambil? Nah, per hari ini, Bapak-bapak dan Ibu-ibu, data pribadi ataupun personal data itu seharga emas di pasaran gelap. Ya, saya berani bilang, kenapa seharga emas? Karena saya juga sering di dark web, dan mungkin sebagai contoh, nah kita ambil inilah Indonesia investigation over breach data of voters. Nah, ini data-data pemilu yang keluar, dan seperti Ibu juga ngomong tadi, data daripada BPJS Kesehatan itu pun sudah ada di dark web, yang maaf saya nggak mau kasih informasinya di mana belinya, tapi udah dijual. Dan sesiapa aja dengan informasi seperti ini bisa mendownload semua data-data pribadi, termasuk nama, nomor KTP, nomor HP, apalagi ya. Saya mungkin yang saya lihat nomor KTP itu malah dangerous lah ya. Terus apalagi STNK kalau ada, dan banyak lagi lah data-data yang menurut saya yang very personal, sangat personal, yang sudah dijual. Dan kalau kita fikir kembali, nah di Indonesia, what is the regulation that talks about this? Dan justru this is actually a very recent problem. Dan ini berlaku pada tahun lalu, dan pada tahun ini saya juga telah mendapat info dan bahawa a lot of other government agencies were also equally affected. But yes, this happened. So when we talk about this, there has to be a regulatory requirement that an organization should be faced with. Yeah, there should be a regulatory requirement. And I'm going to talk about this. Now, maaf ini saya dapatnya dalam bahasa English, so I'm sorry about that. Tapi kalau saya bisa terjemahkan dalam bahasa Indonesia, dia berbunyi seperti ini. Di bawah pasal 91, di bawah Kominfo Regulation 20, perusahaan mana-mana sekalipun yang meng-acquire ataupun menerima, meng-collect, memproses data should be based on consent and under the provision of law and regulation. Dan maaf, saya sampai hari ini belum tetap terlalu jelas dengan hukum privacy di Indonesia. Saya minta maaf kalau mungkin ini masih lagi dibangun atau udah selesai, saya kurang tahu. Tapi kalau saya bisa nge-relate kepada hal yang sama di Malaysia, karena kita juga punya hukum PDPI di Malaysia, yang dimana kalau seandainya perusahaan apa sekalipun, biarpun swasta ataupun pemerintah, dimana kalau seandainya ada kebocoran data pribadi terutamanya, nah dendanya itu sejumlah yang sangat-sangat besar, mungkin juga bisa sebesar 20 ataupun 30% daripada total revenue perusahaan tersebut yang akan dibayar kepada pemerintah sebagai ganti rugi. Nah, 30% daripada revenue bukan kecil, besar tuh. Nah itu daripada lokal ya. Nah, tetapi kalau seandainya perusahaan bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu, saya minta maaf sekali lagi, saya nggak tahu data apa yang perusahaan bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu proses. Tapi seandainya saya mengimajinasikan bahawa perusahaan Anda memproses data negara-negara ataupun data citizen ataupun warga negara Europe, wajib untuk mengikut undang-undang privasi yang sama, tapi yang punya daripada Europe, GDPR namanya. Mungkin teman-teman udah tahu dan pernah ikut atau dan gimana. Nah, dan GDPR juga lebih sadis, langsung 20 juta euro atau 5% atau 7%, saya kurang tahu, revenue perusahaan. Nah, antara perusahaan-perusahaan besar yang sudah kena denda GDPR, mungkin teman-teman sudah tahu, British Airways adalah contoh perusahaan yang besar di dunia yang sudah kena denda GDPR. Singapore Airlines sudah kena. Itu kedua kali. Kalau Malaysia yang hampir tiap minggu kena deh. Ya. Ada aja tetap yang kena. Karena gini, dengan perubahan teknologi yang sangat drastis, kadang-kadang susah untuk mengejar cyber security dibandingin dengan teknologi. Nah, balik lagi kepada faktor asal. If your organization is looking forward capturing market sentiments, you would be more prone to be a organization called bleeding edge. Nah, nama sebenarnya adalah bleeding edge. Perusahaan Anda yang mempunyai strategi bleeding edge, berarti Anda akan fokus lebih ke teknologi. Jadi kita capture market dulu sebelum yang perusahaan-perusahaan lain bikin. Saya mau ini dilakukan dulu. Nah, itu namanya bleeding edge. Nah, rata-rata perusahaan yang lebih agresif ke teknologi, yang bleeding edge, malah yang banyak kena di kasus regulation dan law. Tetapi di sebaliknya, ada perusahaan-perusahaan yang lebih santai ataupun lebih relax. Yang udah kalau ada teknologi baru, ya lanjut dulu. Nah, saya nyusul kemudian. Mungkin saya nyusulnya setelah 3 tahun atau 5 tahun. Bisa juga. Tapi benefit pro dan cons-nya banyak. Ini istilahnya gambling juga sih. Kalau bleeding edge, it's a gamble. If you are able to capture the market sentiments earlier before anybody else does, you win the market. But there's a price. If you wrongly calculate your strategy, you might have to be paying the regulatory penalty. On the other hand, if your organization share, you will be safe, but you'll be slow and nobody will know you. And per hari ini, we actually notice that a lot of new technologies that's coming in has a lot of interaction with social media. A lot of APIs are now coming in. Banyak teknologi baru yang sedang bertumbuh di mana-mana di dunia sekarang. And we actually have a question right now. How is technology is going to impact our business in the long run? One thing for sure, with COVID, we cannot be thinking the same way as how we did before COVID. Okay, before COVID, yes, business is normal. You are in your office, everybody's in your office. Life goes on, everybody happy, done. Today, life is not normal. You're alive today, tomorrow, I hope you're not dead, right? But things can go wrong, right? You must have a good planning strategy. You must have a good plan. Now, antara governance yang bagus, succession planning. Now, I know in technology, we hardly talk about that, but there has to be a succession technology. Let's say, contohnya, let's say something happened to your IT director or IT manager. He got COVID, he was in the hospital. Who's going to operate your business? Right? That's one thing. Oh, another question here is, let's say the whole unit is infected. How is the business going to operate? Who's going to be running the operations? How will your business survive? What are you going to do? Do you have a business continuity plan? But question, is this something that we do in IT? Yes. Is this part of cybersecurity? Of course, business continuity is the prime root security. Anything that we do in cybersecurity is not based on what technology we buy. No, anything that we do in cybersecurity is in regards of one thing. Number one, to make sure the cost of the spend is minimized. Number two, the benefit is maximized. Number three, the business survivability is ensured at any cost, that you will survive. And that is where a lot of people are not thinking straight. A lot of people say, okay, Desmon, I got backup. Yeah, backup, big deal. But backup without a system to roll back is useless. Some people say, oh, Desmon, saya punya cloud. Yeah, okay, Anda punya cloud. Tapi, I'm sorry. Right, sorry. I accidentally clicked. Okay, so you have cloud and whatnot, and then you say, okay, everything can be normal. But you know what? That is not a solution. That is an example of a disaster recovery. So which means that it is an example of what you do when something goes wrong and you temporarily have an area to operate. But what if it's a worst case scenario where everybody is infected? Let's say if it's in a worst case scenario, something really severe happened in your organization that requires you to rethink your business strategy. Now that is something that in terms of governance, people hardly talk about. So basically, the important thing that I want to talk to you here is this. In a proper governance mindset or thinking, you must have a proper way of how do you understand what the current pandemic basically means for the next few years. Now, I'm no expert in medical science, and I'm not an expert in expecting what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not that advanced, but I can tell you one thing for sure. The interesting thing here is, sorry, my bad. Sorry. Okay, here we go. The interesting here is this is not going to stop right now, right? And I'm sad to say this. Some experts that I have in the last few months, karena sejujurnya kalau saya bisa bilang di perusahaan saya kita lagi bingung apakah mau buka lagi kantor atau nggak usah buka kantor, atau kalau kita buka kantor berapa jumlah orang yang harus kerja dan segala macam, karena ya bisnis dari perusahaan saya ini internasional. Kami punya 18 kantor di seluruh dunia. Dan kayak sekarang saya di Malaysia nih, besok udah dimulakan lockdown. Jadi berarti mudik ke kantor nggak boleh, ataupun PP ke kantor nggak boleh. Segala urusan bisnis harus dari rumah. Nggak boleh juga saya lewat daripada daerah saya ke daerah lain, itu pun nggak boleh. Dan perjalanan saya pakai mobil itu dihadkan ataupun punya limitasi cuma sebatas 10 km. Kalau saya mau jalan di atas ataupun di lebih jauh dari 10 km, saya harus minta izin kepolisian. Repot banget. Dan banyak lagi. Dan ini, if you look at it, it's going to be a business problem karena meeting face to face nggak bisa. Kedua, another big problem that most companies are facing right now is work from home is not as effective from working in the office. Two reasons why. Number one, the infrastructure that you have in your house is not as excellent as what you have in your office. So that's one problem. Walaupun kita bisa bilang, oh kita di Asia internet kita lebih bagus, tapi kalau kita pikirkan ulang, dalam kondisi rumah, ya saya cuma ingin nge-relate kepada apa yang berlaku di rumah saya sendirilah. Ya istri pakai internet, anak pakai internet, ya semuanya pakai streaming segala macam. Dan saya sekarang yang pakai Zoom juga, saya udah kasih warning, ini papa mau ada presentasi, jangan pakai internet. Saya udah kasih warning dulu. You see, that's a problem. So if you're working from 9 to 5, and if you have children who's going to be studying from home and all that, it's going to be a problem. So that's just some examples here. So in terms of effectiveness of working, it's a questionable thing. Number two is that the fact that working from home, it also opens up new risks. People, when they are mobile, when they're using the mobile phone to work, when they're using the laptop to work, when they're using any home personal devices to process company data, are actually coming up with a new threat. Simple. In your office, you give them a PC or a desktop computer to work with. But the moment the staff is actually at home, he is using his own computer to access this data. So this is an example of a threat that people are not seeing. The data now is moving from a secure environment to a hostile environment from his computer. So what I'm trying to say here is, maybe your office environment computer has got the good controls to control all kind of threats from potential intrusion. Yes, it's very good. But the moment you are talking about a person in your office environment working from home, there could be a different strategy that we need to think from a governance point of view. What's the worst thing that can happen? All right. Where are the risks? Where are the new risks that can come from? Di kantor ya mungkin mau colok USB nggak bisa, tapi di rumah kan urusannya beda. Colok apa aja semua dia bisa, mau download apa aja bebas. Dan juga kemungkinan sistem-sistem di rumah bisa juga menjadi korban sama orang-orang jahat atau orang-orang yang nggak kepentingan, yang dimana mereka bisa menggunakan sistem komputer dari rumah untuk mendapatkan data-data perusahaan Anda. Jadi ancaman yang daripada dulu dan sekarang sudah berubah. Jadi sebenarnya pemikiran kita berhubungan dengan COVID-19, ya ini saya setuju. Segala sesuatu yang berlaku di COVID-19 adalah sangat mendadak. Saya setuju banget. It happened too fast. It was not planned for. But this is already 1.5 years. We should have done a lot of planning. We should have implemented a lot of security strategies to make sure things are governed appropriately. So, example of things of why IT security governance is important for us. Why is this so important? Well, besides the security issue, the security governance is very important because number one, the governance aspect in your business environment will ensure that your spending is justified. All right, you have a better return of investment. So what I'm trying to say here is when you're spending for your IT, it's just not about spending. We need to have a KPI, a key performance indicator that needs to measure your organization's progression with technology. Okay, you need to measure this. If I were to spend $1 million for a technology, I must be able to see how much of revenue that I was able to generate, or how much of an issue, or how much of a problem that I can solve with the IT investment within a 5-year span that basically demands my return of investment. Examples. But there's another one problem. Technology is also, sebentar ya, I think I have a video problem. Sebentar. Okay, sorry ya, I think there's a problem with my camera. Maaf kalau videonya mati lagi, saya minta maaf ya. I don't know what's happening. Okay. Anyway, yeah, as I was saying, there's also another one problem. We are also looking for return of investment. On another point of view, you just spend this year, by next year, a new technology comes in, a new demand comes in. Actually, to be honest, it's not about the demand of technology, it's the demand from customer that demands the business, right? The customer demands a new business, I mean, a technology architecture for them to facilitate their own, ease of use for technology. But on the other hand, is your company prepared to spend for this? Do you have in your governance strategy, do you have a portfolio and a profile of just-in-time projects that you could execute time frame? Or the most important question here is, do you in your business organization strategy or in your security governance, do you actually have a framework of your enterprise security architecture on your desired state? Let me give you an example. Saya mungkin contoh yang paling bagus saya bisa ambil adalah contoh mungkin oil and gas company. Mungkin saya nggak I have not really worked with oil and gas company of Indonesia, so I'm really sorry. But maybe I can share from Malaysia. We have Petronas, and Petronas has got a very strict security policy. They actually use N+2 strategy, which means when there's a new technology demand that requests them to migrate to a new system, the security governance board of Petronas basically put a very clear guideline. Any new technology that has to be implemented within Petronas IT business ecosystem has to wait minimal 2 years before it's implemented. So that is a governance strategy that has been set by the board of directors of Petronas in regards to the IT security strategy. That's easy. Number two, they also set a minimum baseline requirement for any hardware they are purchasing and any software they're purchasing. Minimum has to have a certain accreditation. Okay, mungkin saya jelaskan dulu ya. Dari sudut strategi Petronas, mereka punya kebijakan ataupun kebijakan secara governance. Mereka bilang, seandainya Petronas mau membeli hardware, ya biar entah server atau apa, sudah ada suatu guidelines yang jelas yang bilang bahwa minimum there is a accreditation process that they have to go through, or the vendor of the hardware must have accredited the server or the software before it's being used inside Petronas ecosystem. So that's another example of a strategic governance policy that's been set by the board of directors of Petronas. An example here. Number 3, the regulatory requirements for IT controls are also okay, hold on guys, I think I'm hearing some babies talking. All right, sorry. Okay, so I'm sorry, so let's just go back to the old slide. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. So I was talking about regulatory requirements. Okay, I was talking about regulatory requirements. I was talking about you know, how in a business environment the regulatory requirements might change. That also might change your business operation as well. In last year, or the year before last year, I'm sorry, GDPR actually changed a lot of things. It came to a point that the way how your data are processed within your organization has dramatically changed. Before year 2020, data handling was not really a big issue because everybody just keep collecting and collecting and collecting data. There was not much control available. But ever since May 18, 2020, moving forward, right, there were quite a number of changes that has been done, okay? Which means in terms of your required regulatory control, the governance has to adapt itself on the way how informations are being processed within your organization. Take, for example, retention policy. Okay, take for example, retention policy. In accordance with GDPR, I mean, just an example here, you are not or no longer allowed to process any data beyond reasonable means from the date of collection. So let's say you're collecting a data, but within that particular 30 days or 25 days, after you collect it, you process it, it should not be kept anymore. And if you were to be found in violation of that, your company or your business can be in trouble because of the violation. So that is another few more regulatory requirements. Dan jujurnya, walaupun di Indonesia ataupun di Malaysia ataupun Singapura atau di mana-mana, insurance organizations, you guys have a lot of regulatory requirements to fulfill. It's not cheap to fulfill all regulatory requirements. But it is a challenge, no doubt. But that's why we need to have a strategic plan on how we fulfill all the regulatory requirements, especially for IT controls. To be honest, these are some aspects of controls that we generally have to think about from a strategic point of view. Like, for example, even from the perspective of how do you select a vendor? Like, what are the key requirements of, like, do you appoint a service provider, or how do you do outsourcing? You know, like, how would you, what is the key minimum requirement? Like, for example, I can share with you some examples of Petronas as an example, another example again. They got office all around Malaysia, but Petronas has got a very strict policy. How do they select the internet service provider? The key requirement is the internet service provider must not be the dominator of that particular region. The internet service provider at least must have at least 5 to 6 exchange within that region before they are selected to become a official provider for internet, for example. And also there's an enforcement. If the service provider can fulfill Petronas the 99.99% uptime requirement, you get the business, but there's a catch. The money is good for if you're a business like telecom, when you get business of Petronas, money is just excellent. But when you screw up, it's game over for you because the penalty is severe. So it's a justification, but of course they pay good, the money is good, but it's a risk. Is the risk really rewarding? Is that a risk you want to go? So a lot of companies are really scared when Petronas says, okay, anybody wants to become an internet service provider? All the Malaysian ISP, generally they are scared because number one, they got a very stringent policy. Yang tidak bisa apa? They do not bow down on the regulation. It's a very strict regulation. Hey, you want my business, you must follow this particular requirement. If you go against this, you don't have my business. Simple as that. For them, it's their business benefit first versus the provider. So it's a very crazy thought, but it of course was part of the governance because they previously have got a lesson learned from previous incidences where the service provider did not fulfill the service level requirement in accordance with the contract. Hence, for every hour of downtime, Petronas was actually suffering from about $6 to $7 million worth of revenue loss for every hour. This is just from one branch. So there was one time in, I don't know if you know this place in Kemaman, Terengganu. It's a place where they have a earth station somewhere around that particular area where it was down for like 2 days. So a 2 days downtime has cost them few hundred millions worth of revenue loss. I mean, not 100, but few. Assume probably nearly about 100 million easily. And that was a lesson learned for them. And then they don't want that to reoccur again. So that's why this particular regulation of providing outsourcing and all that came in. And this is not only for internet service provider, electricity provider, everything within the organization has got a very strict policies. Do we need this? Interesting question. Do I need to be that strict? We need to go down and find out ourselves what exactly are the critical assets within my organization that has very high value to my operations, that has the highest value in terms of my survivability, that has the highest value in terms of my business sustainability, what I can lose and what I cannot lose. This particular aspects has to be clearly defined, and your security governance must be aligned with those particular requirements. Okay, and that is literally something that we talk about. I don't want to go more on this, but they actually use, or the significant use of IT security governance is also to potentially see if there's a new adoption of control framework that might be useful to you. Maybe the current regulations that you have within your organization is top-notch, excellent. Everybody loves it, good. But in coming years, maybe you have noticed that your key risk indicators within your organizations is not really at par of your risk appetite or your risk tolerance level. All right. For some reason, things are not really working well. So in that case, the security governance will be actually a guidance in order for you to have a new control framework adoption. So I'll talk about some of that later on. Okay. So these are some examples of things. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is some example of things that we do in security governance, which is different from IT governance. In security governance, one of the major tasks that we do is to plan risk tolerance. Okay, you plan out your risk tolerance, right? I usually ask this to all my training when I'm actually in person. So maybe if I'm going to ask any of you guys, and I give you a picture here, just think about it. If I got to ask you guys to choose between your mother or choose your wife in a dangerous condition, and you say you choose your mother, or some of you guys say I choose my wife, that basically is a depiction of your risk tolerance. To me, I love my mother. So I might choose my mother as my fallback tolerance, or my tolerance level is I can let my wife die. I can get married again. And yeah, oops, I hope my wife is not hearing me, because if she hears me, I'm dead. All right. So I was just saying that, in terms of tolerance, it's about how your organization views risk. And this particular area of your tolerance or your appetite, and to what level are you able to do things, and what is the maximum things that you can tolerate, are all designed within the Security Governance Committee. And who is it basically built upon? I'll talk about that later. But in that perspective of risk tolerance or strategic planning, the entire organization structure will be analyzed. A very thorough assignment of roles and responsibilities of people who are responsible, accountable, informed, or consulted will be brought up here. And also the document of your enterprise architecture will be put in together to create a harmonious, less stringent security architecture on top of that. So this is where your policies, your guidance, and your security budget will be defined in your security governance area. So that is one part of your security governance job. But of course, once the governance frameworks has been defined, or your direction of your governance has been defined from a high level, that's where your IT managers or your security managers or whoever it is will actually operate based upon your requirements. And of course, you do have the implementers who basically goes all the way down. And if you can look at the arrow, it's not only a top-down approach. Security governance is not generally a top-down approach. It's a feedback system, which means sometimes the security implementation operator might report incidents that has to be brought up to the management, that has to go back to your governance and to realign back your security strategy. Only in cybersecurity, where the entire enterprise governance or security governance is not a one-way stream. No. And the reason why is because cybersecurity is the only industry where you have a feedback system. A feedback system is top-down and bottom-up, both ways. But of course, top-down and bottom-up only applies for three departments, which is the governance, the management, and also the implementation department. There's a feedback system to basically come back. If there's any gap, it goes back to the governance, fix the gap. If there's anything which is not misaligned, well, go back to the implementer and align it. So this is a feedback system that we have. And this is what I want to show you guys. Example would be of a feedback system is the KPI of your incident within your organization can be a catalyst for your system or your governance improvement. And your governance direction would be a direction on the spending on what new security technology that needs to be purchased to match the alignment of your